Hello there and welcome to another episode of Extreme E Off Track. My name is James Baldwin and I'm joined as always by my friend and yours, Michael Laminato. Hello there, mate.
Hello, yes. Good to still maintain this friendship for at least a couple more weeks and we must because the countdown to the next race, the countdown for the next race has been going since the previous race, but it is closer, which means you can dare to look at the clock and know there are not so many days left.
Yes, it is really. We're very close. In fact, when this podcast comes out, we're only a couple of weeks away from it arriving. The Iron X Prix, the St. Helena is already there. And of course, we know how tough the terrain was at the Arctic X Prix. We also know that allegedly, according to Timo Scheider, the terrain was a little tough here at Sardinia as well. So hopefully the cars don't have so many problems. But of course, that's all yet to come. You can tune in closer to the date of the race because, of course, we've got our preview and post-race podcasts. But in this episode, Michael, we chat with Sara Price, don't we?
Yeah, Sara Price from Chip Ganassi Racing, who does know a thing or two about unfortunate terrain-related incidents in Extreme E. Very nice of her not to bill you, not only for, I guess, our time, but of course for causing the commentators curse.
I did apologise.
You did.
I apologise for the podcasters' pots, okay? It's been done. We're moving on, all right?
Yeah, yes. In fact, we tried to reverse curse her at some point, I think. So I'm really worried that in the end it's going to go wrong again and we're going to be like, well, it's just clearly our fault one way or another.
That's how it works, right? Reverse curse, please.
Yeah. Well, look,
guys.
if it does work, we've coined something, I think, and that's something. It's a feather in your cap, isn't it? So we'll find out how that goes over the course of the next month. But it was great to chat to Sara Price, not only about her, of course, experiences in Extreme E in this first season and how that's all going, but really interesting background. Sometimes I think motorsport outside of the US is a little guilty of not talking that much about motorsport inside the US. Sometimes it feels like there's a bit of a bubble separation. So to kind of burst that a little bit, to get some insight on how it is you make your way to something like Extreme E, starting from the west coast of the United States, I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah, she's an incredible person, incredible talent as well. So skilled in so many areas, of course, on two-wheel format and four-wheel format. Look, a great chat. We can't wait for you to listen to it. So I think we should just get straight into our chat with Sara Price.
Sara, how are you doing?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Very
well. Really well. Looking forward, of course, to the next X Prix, which is, we're heading towards the conclusion, aren't we? It feels like the series is going to be over before we even know it. But before we get into what we can be looking forward to for the last couple of rounds of this series, we, of course, want to go way back. We want to go way back to the start of this whole motorsport journey. It's always great to hear unique answers for this one, but I want to know your very first motorsport experience. What was the first moment you realized that this could be a thing that you're interested in?
A thing I'm interested in, or my first motorsport experience?
Well, like the very first, maybe the first car or bike you saw and it was interesting to you, like the first time.
So growing up, I actually, I got into horses first. So I was, showing horses, jumping them, doing gymkhana, and also vaulting. So it's gymnastics on horseback. And my brother raced dirt bikes. So he was always at the track. My dad comes from off-road car racing, but we were pretty young when he was doing that. So my brother did dirt bikes, I did horses. And then my mom didn't know what to do with me at the track because my brother, he's like more calm, I guess you would say. And he went to practice every week, but I had all this energy and she didn't know what to do with all my energy to get it burned out. So I was 8 years old, and on Christmas morning, I got my first dirt bike, which was a 50. And I wanted to ride it so bad that I took it out in the driveway, and my uncle had just got a brand new car and it's sitting in the driveway. And typical first timer on a motorcycle, I whiskey throttled almost into the brand new car, and my dad's grabbing me. And he pulls me over, so I slide underneath of the car. We saved the car. But that's my first experience on a motorcycle. But I've always been a daredevil. Like from the very beginning, I kind of had no fear. And so, yeah, since that Christmas morning, I just never got off the dirt bike. I would go to practice with my brother, and my mom would take me to the Pee Wee track while my brother's training on the big track. And I wouldn't stop until I ran out of gas, pretty much. And so I just rode all the time as much as I could. And then I did my first race and I ended up winning it. And then we had a family friend of my dad's say, hey, you need to take her to the nationals. Like, she's pretty good. So 12 years old, go to my first national, and I win my first national. And so then it was kind of just sparked this whole spiral of like, oh, wow, okay, like we can actually do this, you know? And so we just went hard. I started training really, like every day at it, riding a dirt bike and motocross. And my whole dream was to be on Monster Energy Kawasaki, and I achieved that. I kept doing really well and winning championships. And, I wanted to turn professional at 16 years old, and I did. And it was a heck of a career, and made it to X Games, medaled in that. And yeah, one thing kind of led to another. And that's my start of motorsports was two wheels and motocross. And that's what I put my whole life into. And then we transferred to four wheels.
Wow. Well, starting stunting right from the very beginning, you hadn't even really spent longer than a couple of seconds on a motorbike before that experience, which is great. Before we talk about that part of your career, though, as you said, look, you've had a very successful career in that dirt motocross. In 2008, you had 17 amateur motocross championships, which is fantastic and almost a little ridiculous at the same time. Did you have any kind of mentorship in those early years? And you mentioned that, you had the dream of where you wanted to go. Who was your idol at the time as well?
Oh, yeah, I had tons of mentors. Like I said, I was training every single day, like, in motocross, it's a little bit different than the car driving because every day you wake up, you go to the gym, you go to the track. If you're off the bike for a day or two, it takes a day to get back into the swing of things. It's, you ride that bike every day, and that is your job, and that's the way you're going to be the best you can. So I had trainers that I took many things from each one of them and accumulated what worked for me the most. Then my dad, he raced off-road cars, and he would always go to the track and watch me. And I just I looked up to so many people, and I took the good out of each one that I really liked, and kind of made it my own of what I looked up to all these people for,
It's anyone who knows as well anything even a little bit about motorsport, I think it's fair to say, knows that it's not cheap. It's an expensive business to be in. Whether or not you're crashing to begin with, it's going to be expensive even to start up. We're all of a similar age. We all lived through, I guess, our late teens, early adulthood, through the great financial crisis, the downturn, the economic downturn. Yeah. Not great for motorsport. How does someone engage with that next level? Because at that point in your career, you must have been being ready to turn professional, let's say. How does someone engage with a sport as expensive as motorsport while the economy is really downturning? How do you adjust to that at that age?
Oh, it was long story short, I guess you can say, is the financial side of things, especially in two wheels for a female, was very slim pickings if you were to make a living at it. So that is why I actually ended up in four wheels, because I turned professional at 16 years old, and we thought that there was going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. Like at that time we were on television, we were in X Games, we were in all these high profile events, and that was really good for us. And that was giving us a, oh, we can actually have a future racing motorcycles. Like, this is awesome. But you don't have time to have an actual job, because you have to train on the motorcycle every single day. And you also don't want to get hurt, and you have to take in consideration you're in a dangerous sport, and it's not if, it's when. And so, yeah, that was one of the big turning points in my life, is kind of when it all kind of came to the end, and X Games actually took out our class. And it was like, oh no, that's really what I was kind of betting on to get sponsorship money to make a living doing this. And now I don't have that. So my parents kind of sat me down when I was like 17, and this is pretty close to after I turned pro. And they're like, we thought there would be a future in this, but turns out it's not looking too bright. So we need to figure something else out. And we know you put your whole childhood into this. I didn't go to school. Like, I traveled with a teacher going to nationals, and I ended up graduating at Loretta Lynn's ranch. But yeah, so that's when we kind of made this whole turn, and I couldn't not live without racing. So as well as still racing a dirt bike, I kind of was like, okay, I need to find a job. And then I was like, wait, you have to make this much money to afford rent? This is crazy. Normal people make this money? Like, I'm talking like $1,000 a month. I was like, what? People make that in just regular jobs? So I was like, how in the heck am I going to make it in the real world? And I ended up starting my own auto paint business. And soon after that, I bought my first side-by-side, a Polaris RZR, and I started racing four wheels. And so I got that part of me kind of satisfied with the whole racing still in my life and started my four-wheel career. And as you know, it just kept, now I'm here. I'm glad I got here.
Was there ever a temptation in that period to not continue with it? Because I suppose at some point it must be easy to just feel like, you know, the world's coming in at this point. So much is out of your control in a situation like that as well. How was it that you managed to continue?
Yeah, no, definitely. I would say when I was at the end of my motocross career and I pretty much knew like, okay, this isn't going to be something I can do long term. I'm not going to be able to make a future doing this. It was the darkest days of my life, for sure. And I give so much credit to those days because it brought me to where I am now. But at the same time, there's times you mentioned the word motocross and I would just be friggin' flowing river and I hated it. You know, I just hated the word motocross or it involved in my life or anything because I loved it so much. I was so passionate about it and I was so defeated that I couldn't make it work kind of thing. But that also put me in a situation where I am now. So one of my saving graces was in 2013. Was it 2013? Yeah. I got a phone call from a good friend, Andy Bell. He's like, hey, what are you doing tomorrow night? I have a friend that films these big Super Bowl commercials and he needs 2 girls on a motorcycle. And I only know of you and my good friend, Jolene. And so I was like, yeah, I'm not doing nothing. No problem. Let's go out there. No idea what I was getting myself into. And so I show up. It's a full set. It's a complete, like, trailers everywhere. They're giving me contracts and I'm supposed to do these like wheelies and little stunt things on this neon motorcycle. And it was for a big cell phone company and for Microsoft in the end. And I was like, oh, wow, this is crazy. Like, I just thought I was going to be here for a few hours, helping out a friend kind of thing. And when I got into the union, my first ever job being a stunt woman on a motorcycle, and I got that first check in the mail. And I was like, this is what I need to be doing. I was like, motocross got me somewhere.
Well, this is great because I want to talk about stunts. There is a video of you riding a motorbike on fire. So I was just going to say, how did that end up happening? Talk to us about that because obviously, as you just said, you found this whole other industry that values the talent and the skill that it takes to ride. We know that, especially in the US, but of course here in Australia and everywhere, that there's a film production industry or ad production industry that stunt driving and riding is really sought after, and being one of the few people that, you know, is trusted to be able to take direction by directors and understand what the cameras are doing. How did you find that transition from going about knowing nothing about this to doing that little interaction there to riding on fire?
Yeah. That one, riding on fire, I'll have to tell you all about that. That's funny. I had to say I had really good mentors. So, you know, Andy, the first commercial I did was with a stunt coordinator called Sean Graham, and he's awesome. And I still work with him to this day. And he was a big mentor to me, I would say, in the stunt world. So he'd put me in situations and talk me through it. And, you know, I also, too, would kind of sit back and just was a sponge. I just wanted to like, okay, they're talking about that and that lingo. That's what that means. And kind of just take in all I possibly can and ask questions. And, you know, it's just like anything I do. I'm always never know it all. You never can. So you can always ask questions. Even if this is what I'm a professional at, I still have questions from maybe an amateur or whoever the case is doing it. You know, you can learn something everywhere. But yeah, I just had mentors that taught me everything. And camera angles, it's totally different when you're as a driver. And, you know, basically I'm hired to not do also the cool stuff. Everyone thinks when you think a stunt driver, you think you're doing flips in the air and jumping to the moon and back. And it's like, sometimes I'm just parking a car in a really tight space and it's just do it 100 times and don't make a mistake because this is a one-of-a-kind car. And you're like, oh, no problem. Oh, and that's a $500,000 camera right there 2 inch away from your mirror. And so you're like, okay, this turned into, you know, not as radical, but very like high stress situation where you have to watch out for everyone. So yeah, it's a crazy world. I'm beyond grateful for it. That is how I afford to buy my first house. And I transferred from 2 wheels to 4 wheels when I started racing cars. And now I mainly do automobile commercials.
Don't leave us hanging on the
Yeah,
fire story.
honestly.
Can't say it's a great story. And
Just
then
gonna say.
I guess it's for another day. It's not for you guys. It's not for you.
You have to wait till next season.
Yeah. So speaking of a type, like this is what people think of when they think a stunt woman, right? I get a phone call, and sometimes you get these phone calls and, you know, they're not from the motorsport world and you're not from their world. And so you kind of just, most of the time you say yes. If it has something to do with a car or motorcycle, you know, I'm like, okay, I believe in myself because, you know, I don't know, there's only 10 other females I could ever recommend for that. So let me, you know, I'll take it and we'll kind of have the next step in the conversation. Well, I got this phone call one time and they're like, hey, Sarah, we need you for a commercial for, you're going to be doubling Jason Statham. And I'm like, I'm a girl. I don't know how that works. And they're like, it's a really weird commercial, but you're going to be on fire on a motorcycle with someone sitting backwards. You're going to be wheeling through the streets of a city on dirt with bulls coming at you with a mask on. And I was like, huh, okay. I was like, I think I can do it. I don't know how this is going to work out, but you know, this is where Hollywood magic kind of comes into play. We get on set and we actually have a stuntman who's never ridden on a motorcycle before. And to be able to hold on to a motorcycle while it's wheeling, going backwards is a very hard thing to do because you don't have much to hold on to unless you have like a rig off the back of the bike to do it properly. So he ended up flipping around. And then the mask was actually plated in. The fire was all CG. And the bulls, they had filmed and plated in as well. So basically, it was just me like drifting in on dirt on the street and then wheeling with some guy on the back of my bike through fire extinguishers, like, you know, putting all the smoke down on me. So I'm wheeling through them. But in the edit, in the end, in the commercial, everyone, there was a baby that was Jason Statham. And so it was really interesting because you have this girl body wheeling in this motorcycle, some dude in the back, and you have a Jason Statham face on my face.
I can only imagine how that felt to watch back for the first time. You're like, wow, I was not expecting that. Because it literally just sounded like someone in the marketing department was like, we need fire and a motorcycle and bulls and Jason Statham. And they were like, sure, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting for sure.
I'm sure it sold well as well. How could it not after all of that?
Yeah, it was a cell phone commercial.
Yeah. Look, I want to talk about that transition to 2 wheels and 4 wheels as well, because I think sometimes people think, it's all motorsport. How hard can it be? You're all doing the same. You're wearing a helmet at the end of the day. How different can these things be? But it's weird because we do have a couple of ex or sometimes even current motorcycle riders in Extreme E at the moment. You've obviously already transitioned to 4 wheels by the time you arrived here. But tell us about how difficult it is, how physically different it is from riding a bike to a car. And did it take you, you seem very successful at everything, but did it take you long to adjust to that?
Yeah, it's it's funny because, I even talked to like Laia, who's an Extreme E, and she's, she's still racing motorcycles. But it's funny because you don't get as much seat time in 4 wheels as you do in 2 wheels. Like I was saying earlier, every single day you're expected to ride the motorcycle every day. And in a car, there's like, okay, this budget is not here. I don't have a spare couple millions of dollars to go and, get a ton of seat time. And so you don't get the seat time. So you kind of have to be very witty with it. You have to adapt fast, and you have to use all these skills that you learn in races most of the time to apply them when you get back in a car. So coming from 2 wheels, that was a big change for me. It was something that I had to take all that skill set that I worked so hard for in motocross, and a lot of it did transfer over pretty easily. That was a big help and step, I think, for me, because you learned all these things that you can't just teach overnight, just by looking at line selection or braking points or terrain and kind of knowing what's coming in a way. So yeah, I absolutely loved it. I started in a 900 and I just kept working up my way. I not only raced, but I worked on all my cars and prepped them myself and kind of just went for it. And I was super happy to be racing again and got that feel, like that adrenaline of getting out there and doing the best you can. And yeah, I ended up doing really well. And just one thing led to another and started winning again. It was, awesome. And I was addicted. And, I learned a lot just going through the ranks and the UTVs and the Polaris. And then one thing after another, I actually, for my paint business, I was painting cars at the same time. And I got a little savings, a teeny bit, to where I was like, okay, I bought a house. I can afford to live. And I have a little bit of savings and I want to go racing something. I'm like, something more. So then I started doing stadium super trucks. And I actually led my first ever race, quite a few laps, and really did a good job for my first time because those trucks are hard to drive. And so that got attention from an off-road team that actually I looked up to my whole entire life, called out RPM Off-Road. And this was to race trophy trucks, which are long suspension, unlimited trucks in the desert. And we get to drive hundreds of miles at times. So I went down that road and was super grateful to get the opportunity and ended up winning the trophy truck spec championship in Baja and Sport International in 2019. And it just, one thing after another, it kept happening. And I kept taking every opportunity that I got that, I utilized it to the max. I put everything I had into it to make it a successful, endeavor, and did that.
Sarah, we know that the fan base, I suppose, for two wheels and four wheels often don't cross over. Especially for bigger international sports like MotoGP and Formula One, you find often that they don't really like watching the other sports. So for you, coming from two wheels to four wheels, did you notice any significant difference in either the culture in the paddock or the trackside or the fans at all?
Oh boy, yeah, that's a really good question because that's something that I deal with on the other side that I've realized or, used to realize, not so much now, but yeah, it's definitely different. In motocross, like I said, you have to be this tip-top athlete. You have to be at your most physical, fit self all the time. In a vehicle, you have to be mentally there, obviously physically fit as well, but it's not as critical to be as high intensity a fit as a motorcycle. And so, it's different for sure. But when I got into the cars, I realized people don't like my car post as much. I was like, how funny. And then I would post a motorcycle shot and then I'm like, it's kind of weird. They didn't like the same things, and it was interesting. But then I got into racing off-road, which is a whole different thing than motocross or short course. And oh boy, that is just people having a good time and going for it. And you have to have a lot of your own money to pursue off-road, especially in a trophy truck. I've been very fortunate to have incredible sponsors and teams to drive for. But in Baja in Mexico, the fans are insane. They love it down there. It's their American Super Bowl in Baja. So everywhere you go on the side of hotels, they have paintings of all the trucks. They have shirts they're selling on the side of the road. It's you cross the border and all the federales are like, oh, can we have a poster? That's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
I do want to talk about Baja as well, because one of the great off-road events, I guess, visually spectacular, and of course the challenge is immense. First female driver ever to Iron Woman, for those who don't know, do the whole Baja 1000 on their own. And I think you did the whole series on your own as well in 2019, fundamentally, right, as a driver. I want to talk about the 1000 in particular, though. That's a lot of time to be driving a car nonstop. What was that like as a physical challenge? Because if we talk about the difference in a discipline between motorcycle riding and then car racing, this must just be a completely different challenge again.
Yeah, definitely. It was it's something I really wanted to do because we were in contention of the championship at that time. And I just wanted it to be all on me. If I made a mistake or the truck had a failure, I wanted to be the one in the truck that it happened to because I wanted that championship so bad. But yeah, I was the first ever female to do it in the Trophy Truck Spec Championship or in that class in sport. But there has been other females that do it in other classes. But in the trucks, we did the whole entire series, every mile. The 1,000 took me 19 and a half hours straight.
It's I feel tired just thinking about that amount of time in a car.
Yeah. When I talked to the team, when I told them I really wanted to do that, they really didn't know what to think. But at the same time, I said, guys, like, I can't sleep. If I get out of that truck, I'm going to be bugging you guys like crazy, just trying to figure out where it's at, what it's doing. I was like, I'm not going to rest. I was like, I might as well just stay in it at this point, And I feel like when I have that pressure, you can just kind of harness it and use it for what you need it. And it was difficult, but at the same time, it's the most random thing, because let's say from the Baja 500, I probably made 3 or 4 mistakes the whole race at least. And then you have the 1,000 and I made 2 mistakes. Wow. And I'm like,
that's mega.
Like I expected this is going to be I'm going to have to overcome so many things, and ended up going pretty smoothly, to say the least. But I had to battle it out in a lot of parts of the course that year, and it was a muddy one. And so it was a, long day and night.
We'll get back to our chat with Sara Price in just a second, because we do have to talk about Extreme E at some point. It's the Extreme E podcast. So we'll save that for just a moment. We've got to build up to it because first of all, we do want to hear from Professor Lucy Woodall, who's part of the Extreme E Science Committee. She's an ocean scientist, and of course, we've got the Island X Prix coming up. So we thought, who better to talk about some of the problems that would face a place like Sardinia and how that's going to knock on to wherever it is you might be living right now, because trust me, there will be an effect. We thought we'd catch up with her to get a sense of some of those problems. And we started off really basic. I mean, we know there's a lot of ocean on the world. It's about 70% of the globe. So much of it is unexplored. We wanted to get a sense of just how little we know about the mystery of the ocean.
So I grew up in the southwest of the UK, in Devon, and I grew up in the rock pools. I also grew up in a small town that had its culture very much based on the ocean and the benefits of the ocean for those communities, being a small fishing village. So for me, the ocean has been part of my life. It's been part of my every being since I was very small. In fact, my mother tells a great story that I was about 4, knee-deep in water in a rock pool, and picked up a starfish and said, "What's this?" And then she said, "Lucy, it's a starfish." I must have put it back down, picked up another one. And I said, "What's this?" And she said, "Look, I've just told you, it's a starfish." And I must have looked up with her with a really quizzical face saying, but it can't be, it's a different colour. And I think at that point, she realised that I was going to be a marine biologist. And I guess mothers always know right. So that was me, that was my ocean. And I've been very lucky to be in or on the ocean for a large proportion of my time, really experiencing what it's like to be both an ocean professional working on ships, and then also to be able to look at the ocean as an academic, to really understand what's the stresses that us as humans are putting on the ocean, and how can we be equally as innovative to come up with those solutions so that we create a better ocean for the future.
And of course, the path has led you probably unexpectedly, I'd imagine, from when you were first at the beach, as you were saying, to Extreme E, a form of motorsport. Seems a million miles away from the beach, except for that race we had on the beach, I suppose. How did that come about? And were you a motorsport fan before you came to Extreme E?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, so Extreme E approached me to work with them on the oceans while I've been an academic. I must say I wasn't a motorsport fan. I think most of the racing that I have looked at or been part of has actually been on the ocean, on ships, and mostly sailing ships that are over 100 years old. So this is a really different thing for me. But in some ways, there's some links, because the vessels that I often race on, which are 10 sailing barges, at the time they were the absolute epitome of novel, most innovative ways of using technology. And now, of course, Extreme E has done that within their racing, within the energy transformation, and also actually within the sort of the concept of the race itself. So I would say that, I've got one foot in history, but that helps me best understand where we have innovation in technology today.
Lucy, there is just so much that really we don't know about the oceans, isn't there? We know that, of course, 70% of the planet is covered by the seas, but how much of that is unexplored?
Well, often when you hear about the unexplored ocean, it's phrases like the ocean is less known than the moon, or it's less than 0.1%. I'm not going to give you any of those today, because I feel like the answer really is it depends. It depends on what are you looking at. If you're looking at the little creatures that live at the very bottom of the deepest trenches, well, then a few people have gone and seen them, but not many of us, because we just don't have the technology to allow us to get there, and allow us to get there equitably. And I think what I would say is that we know actually quite a lot about areas maybe in the northern Atlantic, because that's the area that has a lot of the vessels, a lot of the equipment. But then when we move into the southern hemisphere, maybe the middle of the Pacific, then actually it's very hard to get equipment there. And historically, our sampling has really been biased to those areas that have been just off our coasts, in areas that have historically had the equipment available to them. And you might say, well, that's not great, but actually we can do something about it. And indeed now there is a lot of push to understand the ocean more holistically and to have equality in the ways that we are trying to ask our ocean questions, and to be able to answer them as an entire group with leadership from diverse communities. But in fact, this bias that we currently have in ocean data is really problematic, because it's like saying, well, I know your back garden, or I know my back garden, and therefore I know in the entire country. And that is the challenge that we have right now with our patterns and what we're trying to say about a global ocean when we do not have global representation.
That's Professor Lucy Woodall, who's part of the Extreme E Scientific Committee. We'll be hearing more from her over the next couple of episodes, right through to the Island X Prix in Sardinia. But for now, let's get straight back into our chat with Sara Price. And yes, finally, let's hear about how she first got involved as the first announced driver of Extreme E.
Well, I suppose we should probably talk about Extreme E, considering this is an Extreme E podcast. But let me firstly apologise, because in the pre-race for the Arctic X Prix, and I kind of didn't even think about the commentator's curse. Michael and I were talking about who we thought should win, and I was like, 100% it has to be Chip Ganassi Racing, because they bloody deserve it. And then all of the things happen. So sorry for that. I won't ever say it again. I'm sure you perform terribly at the next one. But just to try and, get some luck your way. But look, Extreme E, it's the brand new series, as we know. We're all on the ground floor with this, and it's going very well in terms of getting worldwide attention. As we know, it's brilliant racing. You guys are doing a phenomenal job when you get into the cars as well, without so much time in the cars, as you said before. It's a brand new category, but there's so many familiar faces and factories, and Chip Ganassi is one of the world's motorsport empires, really, isn't it? And Chip Ganassi himself is racing royalty. So can you tell us about what it was like being called up to join the team?
Oh, man. Yeah, like you guys say, it is royalty. And to have that call, I was like, is this real? Like, most of the time people don't even know about us off-roaders, to be honest. It's like we're this like unsung people in the corner that don't get much attention in the motorsport world. And so, yeah, to get that call and to, have the opportunity to be a part of Chip Ganassi Racing, I was like, this is crazy. Like, this has to be a joke, right? I was like, because this is a dream come true. Like, you asked me 5 years ago what my dream would have been, and it would be traveling around the world racing. Yeah. Like, I don't want to just go and travel. I want to go travel and race, because, it just is that part of me that just completes me. And to be on a team with so much pressure of winning championships, it's for sure, something that you better be on your A game if you're going to drive for Chip. And we've done our best. Unfortunately, we've had just so many unfortunate circumstances this year. And, I think me and Kyle both show that we're capable. We have the speed, but it's just our stars are not aligning as I wish they would. But we'll overcome it.
For sure.
And way back in June last year, you not only were you the first driver announced for Chip Ganassi, but you were the first driver announced for anyone. You were the first driver announced for the series, which is quite the accolade. You can take that one. No one's going to take that one away from you, obviously. What attracted you to the series in the first place? What did you know about it when you got the call up, I suppose? And what were your thoughts taking that first step into this brand new motorsport challenge?
Well, one, I thought it was pretty awesome what they represent. Do I race off-road vehicles through the desert that, are gasoline fed? Yeah. But I also love the environment. I love the world. I love, taking care of it as much as I possibly can, aside from the things that I still, obviously am racing. But I also, too, the fact that we're traveling the world, we're bringing off-road motorsports on this whole other pinnacle of attention that we've never had before. So this for the off-road community is huge. And the fact that we're Americans, because that's kind of, off-road is, I would say, a big part of what America and Mexico kind of bring to the rest of the world. And so to get that attention out worldwide is just something that I'm so excited about. And I know that the whole industry is excited about. And then not to mention, it's something new. We're in electric vehicles where, we have a Hummer front end on our electric car. It's pretty freaking cool, And you have an IndyCar championship team, a NASCAR team, and everything else Chip has done and been so successful at going racing in a high profile series. Like you have Alejandro, who is this crazy and visionary who just, I swear that dude will be at dinner and he will just come up with this idea. And then it's like the next day it's executed and you're just like, I didn't think that was possible, but it's already done today. It's crazy. But you have to just appreciate and absolutely love people like that who are at the forefront of our sport and our industries that are bringing it to another level.
Talk us through your experiences at the X-Prix that we've had so far. So desert, ocean, and Arctic. Obviously, the first one, there was a lot of dust and some interesting times there. But could you just talk us through what your thoughts were in all three of those?
Yeah, I would say we've been on a lot more sand than I ever expected. We've been on very sandy terrain, and I'm like, come on, guys, let's get something else on in here.
Come on, Timo.
The first one, it was a little bit dusty at times, and that was a beautiful place, though. Alula was just incredible. Like I always talk about the ocean if you're thinking of some paradise, but then you go there and you're like, they have lights that are shining on the mountains to show them off at night. And I'm like, that is so cool. And I've never seen something like this before. So we're racing through this. That's crazy. So that was awesome. But, and then the Ocean X-Prix, that was a more technical track. I think that really brought a lot of racing out, and all of us hadn't had the chance to truly race because the first round was, more dusty. And so that was really exciting, and everyone kind of got their first taste, I think, of real extreme E racing, door-to-door racing. And then, it was really cold in Greenland. That's what I can
Well, I'm going to ask you about the cold in a little bit, because I know you experienced it a little bit more than most. But before we get there, I do want to talk about something you mentioned just a second ago as well, is that you're the only all one nation team, I suppose, in the series. It's an all-American team. And I've always thought it's funny. Motorsport does put a lot of emphasis on, where the drivers and the teams come from, but it's rare you get something like that, a team that sort of cohesively represents one place. What does it mean to be able to do almost like the Olympic thing, I guess, right? To go out as an American team, win races, compete in races in this formation for Chip Ganassi?
Yeah, it's incredible. To be able to represent the U.S. in such a honorable way, it doesn't get quite better than that. To race for Chip Ganassi Racing and to be the American team, it's kind of like, okay, we have a lot of pressure. Let's really fly our colors, proud and make them proud. And not only, since we're the biggest off-road country, we're also bringing that to the light. So it's been a pretty amazing experience, and the exposure and everyone who is excited about it. It's been really cool to educate them as well on what we're doing worldwide and bring that to their attention, because not a lot of people here are, as advanced as the other countries in the world when it comes to like electrification or whatever the case might be on what everything we're kind of representing on our racing right now.
How's the relationship between you and Kyle? Because we know that, obviously you've got this competitiveness by yourself in your own series around the world. And then suddenly for most of you, you're all coming into this sport where you have to do a lap each. So you have to share information. We know that, Katie Munning said it after her victory at the Arctic X Prix that she learnt a lot from her teammates. So what was it like for you? Did you know Kyle beforehand? And then what's it like when you actually get trackside?
Yeah, so I actually, I've known Kyle for a really long time. I wasn't always very close to him. I didn't know him that well, but we knew of each other. We kind of, hi, bye type of thing. Always watched his racing. And yeah, so when we were teamed up, I thought, okay, we're going to be a good team, we're going to be fast. That's for sure. But yeah, it's something new for me. I, even when it came to like Baja, I was really bad at sharing, like doing the 1,000. And so, and I'm sure, same thing with Kyle. Like, I don't think I really don't know if he's ever really truly shared, besides maybe one race, in Baja too. So yeah, it was new for both of us. And that is something that, it's 50%, 50%. We each have half of this goal we need to achieve together. So yeah, it's been an adventure so far for our team. But one thing I do have to say is that we have a phenomenal team and personnel and people that are a part of it. Because if there's been a team that's gone through the ringer so far, I'd say it would be us. And we've overcame a lot so far. And, that includes Kyle and myself. Like we're part of that team when they need help, we're right there with it. So.
Well, you've had experience having someone's face CGI'd on yours. Have you ever been tempted to just do the 100%?
Yeah.
You've proved you can do it. So.
Oh, yeah, the CGIing, at least I wasn't on fire.
Yeah, well, it'd be more dramatic. If you were also on fire, you win the race. I think there's something in that. Maybe for a future, maybe for season 2. Maybe we'll save it for another year. Look, I do want to talk about, of course, the sustainability aspect of this sport, but in particular, people would have seen the spectacular images from Greenland, racing right at the foot of the glacier, if you like. One of the most dramatic landscapes I think we've probably seen so far in Extreme E. But you and Kyle had a very, let's say, up close and personal experience with the glacier, with the cold there, camping on the ice sheet. People might have seen this on the Extreme E social pages in the last couple of weeks. Just explain to us what that's like, because it actually only struck me when I saw this video that, who else gets to walk on a seemingly endless ice sheet and spend time there? It must have been pretty cool.
It was pretty awesome to experience it. So how that all came about was, they had originally asked me and I was like, yeah, no problem. I thought everyone was doing it. I didn't know it was just me and Kyle as a team, and there's just the media. So yeah, like I said, I've been really into learning about, these projects that we've been living on or dealing with when we go to these environments that are impacted, that Extreme E is bringing us on for along the ride. Like we learned about the turtles of the Red Sea. We learned about the mangroves and the Ocean X Prix. And then now it was the Arctic. And we were on this ice sheet and it was crazy. I got off a plane from traveling for 2 or 3 days, and then they're like, all right, cool, you're going to hop on this bus and you're going to go camp now on the glacier. And then by this time, I asked people who are going and they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I think you guys have this wrong. Maybe the schedule's wrong. Like, only me and Kyle are told we're going. They're like, yeah, it's just you guys. And I'm like, okay, I'm down. I love adventure. I'm all in. So I was in like yoga pants and running shoes. And I didn't know that they were going to supply like warmer clothes. And I brought a little bit warmer clothes, but not really, because I'm from California. Yeah. I don't deal with the cold very much. And so I have my team gear on. I have my like big jacket, my beanie, and then I'm like layering socks up and everything. But we start hiking up, and it starts to get pretty cold. So my toes are numb at this point. And so by the middle of the night, I actually got up to get out of my tent, slipped and fell in the middle of the night, and landed in a stream. So I was not only in like little layer clothes, I was wet. And then I had to go to bed in like, we only had like a sleeping bag and like a tiny pad, and then we're just on the ice. So like there was no way to get away from the ice for the most part. And then also too, you didn't want to warm up the ice. So yeah, it was a very cold night to say the least. But the fact that there was a stream when I woke up in the middle of the night and I fell in it, that was a super sad thing, because that's just glacier melting, and it's a big issue. And when we were up there, it only rained 5 times that year so far, and they're like, yeah, no way it would rain, no way. It's raining when we're up there. The one day, the 6th time that year, it was raining. And I was like, wait, so this isn't normal? Like, because I don't know any different. I never been on a glacier before, an ice cap. And so, it's kind of sad to see, because you're like, wow, like there's a lot of water flowing right now, right here. Like our tents might float away type of thing. I'm like, is this going to get any crazier or whatever the case was? But yeah, made it through the night. It was super windy. And so good thing my tent had a little bit of keeping me safe, but it was freezing. And then the next day we had to meet up with the rest of the series to go meet the scientists to learn about black ice and help them take samples. And they're coming down like the hill that way. We're like walking on the glacier like this way. And they're like, oh, hey, Sarah, what bus were you on? And I'm like, oh, we were camping out there. And they're like, wait, what? I'm like, yeah, we're camping on the ice over there. And they're just like, no way. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, it's kind of cold.
To say the least.
I hope you use that as an awesome, like, competitive flex. Like, yeah, I'm ready for this race. I've been sleeping on the ice.
Yeah, the day before the race. And I'm like, oh boy, I hope I don't get sick. I was like, and then you have COVID. It's like, this is probably, if I do get sick, this is an actual cold. I promise you. This isn't COVID.
I suppose for everyone, it was a bit of an eye-opening experience, wasn't it? Because, I mean, Greenland is such a big place, but to have this whole motorsport series arrive, and of course we had the whole broadcast, and really all of you with pretty significant social media followings individually, you were able to reach not only the broadcast, of course, but you guys specifically were able to reach all of these key audiences in different parts and different series around the world. Was it interesting for you to see just sort of how different it was for these guys to actually appreciate something like this? Because I think with Ocean X Pre and talking about plastic on the beach is one thing and cleaning it up in mangroves, but to actually see glacial melt and then to say, well, this is where it was 50 years ago and now we're racing here. We should be on ice.
Yeah, it was super humbling, to say the least. And then also to talk to the locals. It's a small town. There's not a lot of people that live on Greenland, because obviously you can't. And so there wasn't very much there to really, put it out there. And to hear like the way that they survive and what they deal with, and to learn all these different aspects of the glacier melting. There was times when we were driving up to where we went to the ice cap, there was an iceberg in the middle of the road. And it was about, I would say, at least 500 feet from where the water was, where the glacier breaks off and is draining. And he goes, any idea like how that got there? And I'm like, no, I don't get it. Like, how in the heck could that iceberg get onto the road? There's no ice around it. Like, this is weird. And I guess when like all of a sudden underneath the glacier is where it drains from. And when there's so much drainage, sometimes there's stuff that blocks it. And then that blockage will come out and the water will rise. Like lakes will overfill and they'll come up 50 to 100 feet. Wow. And that iceberg that had just happened like a week ago, I guess, before we got there. And so it brought that iceberg onto the road. So it's a very dangerous place to live too, with all the snow melting. And, you have all these other issues, and you have all the soot that comes off the glacier. So their bay, where we're getting brought back and forth to the ship to go sleep at night, they have to be careful because their boats can only go, and they have 2 feet of water to boat in just to drop us off. And that's because all that dirt that's coming off of the glacier is collecting in their bay and it's draining off right where we need to be. So there's all these different things that you think of that you don't think of when you think of a glacier melting. You're kind of like curious on the educational side of it. Like, okay, but why? We just have melting water. But all these other things are also caused because of it. And obviously global warming, when that's a large part of the reason why the rest of the world is able to keep a good climate is because of that.
Really sobering stuff to learn about over the course of some of these rounds. Look, I want to change tack just a little bit before we wrap this one up, because one of the other aspects we've touched on here with Extreme E is, of course, the unique way that we line up the drivers. Not only do we share everything 50-50, but of course it's one male, one female driver. And motorsport is one of the sports, generally speaking, where men do compete with women. Sometimes there are debates about it, but I think that's generally the accepted fact. Certainly it is at Extreme E, which is certainly a good thing. But of course, the challenge has always been, to try and ensure there are enough young women in the lower ranks to rise up to the top, naturally enough. How important is it for, let's say, aspiring racers to see women competing at the very top, competing on an equal footing? And what more can motorsport do, I suppose, to encourage young girls to take this up as a career opportunity?
Well, like I was talking about with the motocross days, I kind of, I came to the end of this tunnel that I thought a light was going to be at, and there was nothing there. This is giving girls who are looking up to all of us racing Extreme E or doing anything at this sort of level that they have a future. They have a reason to put in the work now. They have a reason to have this dream and this goal because they want to be an Extreme E driver one day. And that is something that, one, doesn't really, it usually creates a little bit of hesitation for females because they don't have a spot necessarily. They're there with the guys. And sometimes, at the first thought of it, they're like, oh, well, I'll never be as good as the guys, which, we're trying to step away from that thought process. Like whenever I hear someone say that, let's have a talk. Like there's no reason you cannot be as good as the fastest male out there or whatever the case is. When you're on a motorcycle, that's a little bit different. You have a lot of strength that comes into play. There's a lot of different things on a motorcycle that genetically we are not made to be as strong as a man on a motorcycle. And in a car, you put on a helmet and there is actual scientific proof that proves females can be better in a lot of situations. And I think that's why I've been successful in Baja, because you have to be strategic. You have to be able to hold your own and also keep your cool in these high-end situations where men are filled with testosterone and they want to just go and where we're like, I'm going to let him go because he might just crash in about 50 miles. Oh, he's rolled.
Yep.
So there's a strength also to being a female in this world of motorsports as a driver, specifically because we are completely equal to a male. And so when you put the helmet on, you're a racer, and this is giving them a future to look up to.
Electric racing. Do you think people have been sold on it yet? Because we know, as you said, Alejandro is just the guy who just gets things done. And of course, with Formula E being his baby all those years ago, and I mentioned this in a previous podcast, we know that Zach Brown, when he announced McLaren were joining, said that, when Alejandro came to the Formula One paddock and said, hey guys, I'm going to start this electric racing series, everyone kind of laughed him out of the room. Do you think now, and with the addition of this series, that people have been sold on it? Because so many people, fans or racers, remember the first time they walk into a service park or paddock and smell, the tire burning and the oil and the gas and all that kind of other stuff. Is there something more that needs to be done to get people across the line, or do you think this is the series that's going to do that?
I think this series is breaking boundaries with that. My own experience has been, I come from these big trucks that guzzle gasoline, and, that's where my fan base is. And doing this was something completely new for myself. And I had people on my social media like, how dare you preach this to us? And and they were so against it. And, it was pretty cool to see now on my social media, the whole change. So it's gone full circle. So at first they were kind of like, they didn't like the change. So they were not okay with it. They didn't like it, but we're going to keep doing it. And then they became fans and they're watching it. And then now they're total fans. They want to see what the next race is. They want to see what's happening. And that's exactly what the world needs, and especially America, because we're a little bit behind, I think, on the electrification side of it. And, you know, we're in a Hummer EV. It's pretty awesome. Like, they're coming out with this machine that is totally off-road capable. So it's the perfect platform for them. And that's an American kind of vehicle that everyone's always looked at forever. But yeah, it's been really cool to kind of see our industry and our side of things. People change their opinion. They go from, I'm not sure about this, and they're going to be keyboard warriors, to, wow, this is actually pretty cool. Okay. And, you know, like, maybe we're going to be having an electric trophy truck or whatever the case is. And then they're really going to be like, well, that's pretty cool. You know, this is the way of the world now.
Yeah, it almost grants permission, doesn't it, to other series to be able to do that. And, you know, even MotoGP's got Moto E now, and, you know, Formula E, this, you know, off-road, it's good stuff. It's really encouraging to see, for sure.
Yeah.
And finally, looking ahead, of course, to the next race, the Island X Prix, I guess to a certain extent a little bit unknown. It was a late addition to the calendar, if you like, although it is the same for everybody as we approach that event. Obviously expecting a bit more of a smooth weekend, let's say, compared to what unfortunately you've been experiencing more recently. But what are your expectations in Sardinia?
Oh, man, to finish and to just at this point, I just want a smooth weekend. I just want it to go well, and, you know, us just pull it together and have a very solid day. Like, make it to the final, don't have any upsets, you know, even if we're not the fastest, just hold it together and make Chip proud, and, you know, have a good first smooth weekend.
Well, we wish you all the best for that, Sarah. And of course, we now know that there is a second season of Extreme E2, so we can get all the bumps out of the way in season 1 for you and Kyle to dominate for all of season 2. You have been an absolute legend. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We wish you well in Sardinia and at TBC, which is a very popular track for many series all over the world. TBC race circuit.
One of the great races.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Great to catch up with Sara Price from Chip Ganassi Racing, of course, and hoping for some better luck for her, at least luck not caused or impacted upon by this podcast for the next race.
In any way. I will feel terrible if it's nothing but a win for them to be perfectly honest.
Don't set the bar too high. You only got to set yourself up.
But they deserve it, don't they? Sarah is such an impressive resume already, and she's early 30s like us, and so much already has happened. Such a bright future ahead as well. But for an Extreme E point of view, of course, as I said, it's nice to get the bumps out of the way in the first season, so hopefully they can have a clearer run in the second season. But really, with 2 races to go of a 5-race calendar, there is still an ability to make some kind of a dent, isn't there, in terms of how they're playing out. And we know that these 2 in their own right are very quick, and then coming together, again, a very, very quick pairing that we just haven't been able to see yet.
Well, it's such an interesting element for Extreme E racing, is that you only have so much time to get yourself sorted. And then luck, of course, plays a huge part. I mean, Chip Ganassi as a motorsport brand, as an empire, there's no doubting the powers of this team. But unfortunately, luck has just not been with them. But by that same token, you know, it can very easily reverse, can't it? You have a nice, clean weekend, championship leaders have a bit of a rough time, and suddenly things even out a little bit more. So it's certainly by no means over, not literally or figuratively, which is good news for the show, obviously. It'd be silly to continue the podcast if the racing was over. But that means there's still very much to hope for. And of course, like you said, the quality of the drivers in that team mean we can only hope, or we can only expect that luck to turn eventually.
Well, there's only a couple of weeks until we are in Sardinia. There's plenty to expect. So a massive thank you to you for listening. And of course, a massive thank you to Sarah and to Lucy for their time as well. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider subscribing on Spotify. You can hit the follow button on Apple, now that I know that it's a follow button and not a subscribe button. And feel free to leave us a review if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, or if you're watching us on the Extreme E YouTube channel. It helps a lot. We love doing this, and I have to tell you, there are some amazing names still to come. But stay tuned and make sure you subscribe for our Island X preview podcast, which will be out just ahead, the Friday ahead of the racing over the weekend. Michael, I cannot wait, and let's just hope no podcasting pox occurs for us.
Can only hope. I'm warming up the pizza oven though for a race in Italy, so let's hope for pizza and not poxes.
What a way to end. See you later.